I can send the link in this chat if you can email it.
Okay.
So
All right. So Rob MJ Berman at.
yeah, so that's the link. It's in this Zoom chat.
Why don't you email it to him?
Oh,
Okay,
here, I
just-
can email it to you right now.
Email it to me right now.
Yeah, okay.
I know how to invite people in the past. I just don't know how to do it in the middle of this, and I don't have Paulina's email right on hand. All right.
I just sent it, Rabbi.
So if you just click forward, that should. Do
Yeah,
it.
yeah. That much I do know how to do. All I have to do is get your email.
Had to walk my mom
Got
through
it.
adding
Okay.
footnotes today, so
I'm sorry?
I had to walk my mom through adding footnotes to a document today. So
Okay.
we all
Way to
go
make
through
me
it. And
feel-
my student had to.
That's
walk
not
me
making me
through
feel any
hyperlinks.
better. I have to admit.
Well, my student had to walk me through putting hyperlinks into a document, so it happens to everybody.
Okay, I sent it to Paulina. Hopefully she'll get it. She'll still be working on it. If not, we're, okay. All right, I apologize. As I said, one of these days I'm going to get everything all squared away. The next day, the Messiah comes, so we don't have to worry about the class anymore. Okay, let me get the roll here. Okay, let's see, Jonathan. Okay, and Adriana, are you there, Adriana?
I'm here at the hospital.
At the hospital. Well, Paulina's at the hospital too. I don't know which hospital she's at. Or maybe, I don't know. No, that's a different problem. Okay, Tommy's here, Tommy and Adam. All right, Shani. Shani's not here yet. Shani, are you here yet? All right. Valerie, there you are. You said hello in the parking lot. And Maya. And Paulina, hopefully she'll get online. And Alex is here.
Present.
Present and accounted for. Joseph, are you a present? There you are. Valeria. You did it right last week. Valeria. And Kay. All right. You're here? You're here? Yeah, Kay and Hartley. So Paulina, we hope will get to us. And Shanae's not here. Okay. All right, tonight, because of the way the calendar falls this year, we're moving right into the next holiday on the schedule, which is Sukkot and Shemini Atzeret. In Hebrew, we refer to the Shalosh Regalim, right? The three pilgrimage festivals. They're called Regalim, pilgrimage festivals, because in the Torah, we're told that you're supposed to go to the central sanctuary, which eventually is in Jerusalem, to celebrate the holiday. So the Shalosh Regalim, the three pilgrimage festivals, we'll start with Sukkot right now, but that's not how it's in the Torah, Sukkot. Then next one we will have is Pesach, Passover. And then finally, we have Shavuot. In the Torah, it always starts with Passover. Remember, Chodesh Nisan is the first month of the year in the biblical counting of the months. Paulina is coming on. So we always count the holidays with Pesach being first, Passover, Shavuot, Sukkot. That's how it's normally referred to biblically. My goodness. Wow. All right, you get the prize. Right. Unstable internet, that goes with me. Okay, so interesting, really the Shalosh Regalim, the three pilgrimage festivals biblically are really more important than Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, because those are the holidays you're supposed to go to the temple, to the Beit HaMikdash, to the central sanctuary. You don't have to, whatever celebration that you do at home, it was fine. During the times of the temple, when it existed, there were special sacrifices that took place to celebrate all of the holidays. But your presence, or at least the male presence, it seems the Torah mostly implies the men had to show up, was demanded on the three pilgrimage festivals. And for some cockamamie idea, I always say when my time goes up to heaven, I can ask the Kadosh Baruch Hu, how come you put everything together? We got Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot on top of each other. Couldn't you have spaced them out a little bit? Give us a little more room. But remember also that Sukkot is a festival that talks about the harvest, the fall harvest, and this is the season, right? So that's why Sukkot is celebrated so close to Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah is the 1st of Tishrei. Yom Kippur is the 10th of Tishrei. And Sukkot is the 15th of Tishrei. All right. I said 15th, 14th of Tishrei. Okay. So, yeah, I'm sorry about that. Right? I get my numbers straight. I always get confused on numbers. Okay, because Yom Kippur is going to be when? What day of the week is Yom Kippur? Right, Tuesday night, Wednesday. So Sunday night, the same night as Rosh Hashanah. So that's right. So 2 weeks later, after Rosh Hashanah, which actually makes it the 15th. All right, I was right the first time. Sometimes I how old am I? Let me see. I forgot. It used to be, it was an old joke, unfortunately, when AIDS was a terrible ravaging, that the guy goes to see the doctor and the doctor says, I've got bad news and worse news. And he says, what's tell me the bad news. The bad news is sorry? No, bad news is that you've got HIV. Okay, so what's the worst news? And he says, you're getting Alzheimer's. I said, oh, thank God. I was afraid you were going to tell me I had HIV/AIDS.
Rabbi, were there any other reasons to think that the three holidays, the pilgrimage holidays, were established besides religious, perhaps for taxation, perhaps for census?
Well, we have mentioned.
Raise an army. Were there any other reasons?
Well, I don't know. I don't know specifically of any reasons. Certainly, every culture has agricultural festivities, right? That's a universal.
But why would they? I agree, but these are holidays that people were encouraged, not enforced, but encouraged to come in person. You can celebrate agricultural holidays in the Galil, in the
granted
anywhere you like.
Well, there's no evidence. There's no evidence of that.
Any other reason besides religious giving?
There's no inkling of it anywhere.
Except they were running a country, and they might have taxation. They might
they had taxation for sure. Well, first of all, two things. One, counting was always a problem. The numeration of people was an issue. The Bible frowns upon counting people. King David, supposedly, according to the Talmudic interpretation, is punished for having a census. How did they make a census of the men of military age during the biblical period? The machzit shekel. Every adult male was supposed to give a half shekel. Well, if you had 1 million half shekels, that means you had 2 million men. Even today, in very orthodox and not so orthodox circles, many circles, if you want to see if there's a minion present, You don't say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You say Oshia et amecho varech et nachlatech reim nasem ad olam. Okay, we got 10. Because there's this idea, and again, it's not unique to Judaism, that counting people is problematic. It's opening the ayin hara. It's opening the door for demonic aspects. So census, I don't believe, was part of it.
Taxation?
Well, yeah, but taxation was done locally. If taxes are raised, what taxes did they have? They had crops. Most people didn't pay money. You didn't have money. 3,000 years ago, when we talk about money in the Torah, almost all the time it's really weights. A shekel is really a weight of gold or
They
silver.
left their cattle down there and their calves for sacrifice. Surely it was a way of dealing with running. They were running.
Yeah, well, but you don't have any money.
No, you drop off a cow.
Okay, drop off a cow, maybe. And indeed, when it comes to the taxes system, the biblical tax system, not to the king, the biblical tax system was you had to, when you harvested your crops, you had to take off what we call truma, which is minimum 1/50th. That goes to the Kohen, to any Kohen comes around. 1/10 after that goes to the Levites. Alternate years, it goes to the poor. And on the other years, you're supposed to eat it in Jerusalem. Then you convert it to money or whatever you can carry to Jerusalem if you live too far away to bring the crops or the animals to Jerusalem. It was mostly talking about crops. We do talk about tithing of goats and sheep. All of these tithes, though, are in reference to the priests, and there's no biblical evidence. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist, but lack of evidence is not proof of no evidence. But the Bible doesn't refer to taxation this way.
When you're saying Bible, we're talking Tanakh. We're not talking Pentateuch.
We're talking about Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible, the 24 books of the Hebrew Bible. All right. And so we do know there was a curvy. The curvy was personal service. You have to give service to the king for a certain period of time. But again, the taxation for money to the king and to government, because that's really was the king, that we don't have much, as far as I know, there's no real evidence of. So the holidays were purely religious social events. Right? Doesn't mean you couldn't, but I as you saw, you said, it wasn't something that you had to do necessarily. The police didn't come around and say, show up in Jerusalem.
There might have been some serious social pressure, like there is to go to the Hajj.
Yeah, exactly. But again, it's to celebrate the temple. That's all I can tell you. It's a good question, but I don't know beyond that. And certainly they did bring offerings, money offerings, if they had money, to the temple at other times as well to it. But again, just like, there's a Thanksgiving secular holiday here in Canada. In the US, there's a Thanksgiving, a crazy time in November. But every culture certainly celebrated the seasons and agricultural seasons. And we'll see if you look at some of the elements of Sukkot, you see very much how that was influenced by the fact that it was an agricultural event. So let's understand. So Sukkot always is going to fall in the autumn. It's going to fall close to the time of the autumnal
Did he drop out for you as well? Okay.
I think the internet's really bad there or something.
Well, it's nice to meet you guys.
Yeah.
How do we get back in?
So I think technically we're still in the meeting.
So he has to re-enter.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which I don't understand because it's his meeting, so.
Yeah, you
So it's still
vote for him.
going. Yeah. So. Oh,
Oh, there
okay.
we go.
Okay, we're back again, guys. Sorry.
It's okay.
So I don't know how much you missed. We went through the entire year and the test is next week. Okay. When did we lose? When did you lose me? Do you know? All right, but I just real quickly, the last few things I'm saying that Sukkot falls in the autumn. It's a harvest festival, and it's all really related to the agricultural realia of the land of Israel. Okay. So now we're told for 7 days to celebrate, and there's an 8th day, Shemini Atzeret, 8th day of assembly. And remember now, go back to our calendar situation, right? The calendar was originally based upon people seeing the new moon. If you didn't see the new moon on the night after the 29th day of the month, that meant that that month was 30 days long. And the next day, the following day would be the first of the next month. If the new moon was seen the night after the 29th day, it's now the first day of the next month. So you count 15 days from when the new moon is declared, you got Sukkot. But you don't know. You can generalize, which we know that month of Elul was always 29 days long, but that's not really part of the original biblical idea. You had to have witnesses to see it. Right? So theoretically, you might not be sure what day Sukkot would fall. So the first 2 days of the holiday of Sukkot are full holidays. The next 5 days are what we call Chol HaMoed, Chol HaMoed, the intermediate weekdays of the holiday. And the last 2 days are full holiday, Shemini Atzeret, and the second day of Shemini Atzeret, which we have to treat individually as well, Simchat Torah. Okay, we all together still? Yes, Shemini Atzeret and Simchat Torah. Now, if you go to Israel, you go to Eretz Yisrael, you have the 7 days of Sukkot, and you have Shemini Atzeret, which is both Shemini Atzeret and Simchat Torah, because they only have 1 day at the end. 1 day at the beginning, 1 day at the end. So my 2 brothers and all of their offspring and grandchildren and great-grandchildren only celebrate the first and last day. Right? We celebrate 2 at the beginning and the 2 at the end. Okay. So now, there are a couple of observances that are unique to Sukkot that we will come to. But first, I just want to review. Since the holiday is regarded like Shabbat in many aspects, we're not supposed to do work. And indeed, if it were not for the fact that we need to cook, we would celebrate the first day of the holiday just like we do Shabbat. But it says in the Torah that that which you need to cook, you will cook. All right, so you can certainly cook. So the rabbis understood that to mean that on the Yom Tov itself, the first day, in our case, 2 days of Sukkot, we're allowed to do those things that are connected with cooking. Right? We're not, you can't weave a rug. You can't plow your field. Well, you could transfer, we'll come back, transfer a flame. You're allowed to put wood on your fire to cook over. You're allowed to cook your meals. you're supposed to start the fire before the onset of the Yom Tov. But after that, you're allowed to add wood to the fire. You're allowed to transfer a flame from one place to another. You just can't initiate the flame to start with. That's why, just like on Shabbat, when do we light candles on Friday night? What is the basic rule? When do we light candles?
18 to 20 minutes.
18 to 20 minutes. We usually go by 18 minutes, okay? If you said 20, I'd pass you on it, but 18 minutes is the standard that we follow, but there's nothing, there also is a standard of 20 minutes. Neither one is wrong, right or wrong, okay? So too for the first day of Sukkot. We'll have to talk about the second day of Sukkot differently in a minute. So, even though you may cook in advance, which we do in session day with refrigeration, everything is not such a big deal. Nonetheless, it is permitted to cook. If you're cooking and you have a gas flame on your stovetop, that's a real easy one. While you got the pot on the flame, if you need to turn the flame down because you don't want to overboil, right? So you turn the flame down and then you take the pot off, right? If you don't have the pot on the flame, you're not supposed to monkey with the flame. You can add fuel to the fire while you're cooking on it. So that's the concept that works. There are differences of opinion on electricity. If you can use electricity, then you can turn it up and down, but you shouldn't be turning it on. Right? So in the traditional Jewish household, if they have, they would put a cover over the flame so that you'll be reminded not to turn it off. It's called a blech, especially on Shabbos. On Yom Tov, you don't need a blech, but some people do that anyway just to cover the flame so it's you don't burn yourself. Right. The evening of the holiday, of the first night of Sukkot, first night of Shemini Atzeret, is relatively simple. You have services in the synagogue. You come home, you make a kiddush, like you do for Shabbat. You make hamotzi, the blessing of the bread, and you eat a festive meal. But what's special about Sukkot, you're not supposed to do that indoors. You're supposed to do it in your sukkah. What is a sukkah? Gazebo. Well, sort of. That's a start. That's a start. The halachic definition, the legal definition of a sukkah is some kind of structure that has at least two and part of a third wall and a roofing that is made from natural things, but it's not attached completely to the roof. So limbs, fronds, palm trees, whatever you may have. It's supposed to be so thick that during the daytime, if the sun is shining directly overhead, there'd be more shade in the sukkah than there would be open spaces of light coming through. But it should not be so thick that if it rains, the rain will be kept out. So there's a little balance there. Right? Most people work on it, they're more worried about the shade than they are about rain coming through. That's one of the nice things about living in Israel, because this time of year is not the rainy season. So in Israel, the likelihood of rain on Sukkot is very small. Living in North America, I've had snow in my sukkah, much less rain.
Can you sleep there?
No, we'll talk about sleeping in the sukkah. Don't let me forget to talk about the differences, okay? So one of the major element that people see is the idea that you're supposed to have a sukkah, and you're supposed to make the sukkah, as it were, your residence, which means you should eat and drink and sleep and do whatever you're going to do in the sukkah. That's the ideal. And once again, in Israel, it's possible to do so. Toronto depends upon the time of year, how early in the season it falls. Also, it depends a lot on how many wasps come into your sukkah. You know, that's why the bee went to visit a bar mitzvah. So there are two bees hanging outside the window of a bar mitzvah celebration. One bee goes inside. When it comes out, it's wearing a kippah. So the bee says, "Why are you wearing a kippah?" It says, "I didn't want anybody to mistake me for a wasp." For those who don't understand that, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. I know, you have to live with my jokes. I'm sorry. I get paid by the joke. Okay, so now, the Talmud is relatively strict on this and says you're supposed to make kiddush and motzi and eat your meal in the sukkah. What if it rains? You know, you're supposed to wait until the rain stops. But if it's really pouring, there's obviously you're not going to be able to do it. So what can you do? You try to make kiddush if you can in the sukkah. You try to make hamotzi if you can in the sukkah. And then you go into the house and eat your meal. Similarly, ideally, you're supposed to sleep in the sukkah. In northern climates, it's rare that people sleep in the sukkah. There are those who do, and when the weather is nice, even more so. But it's also relatively standard that most people don't expect everyone to be sleeping in the sukkah. Okay. Now, the sukkah has to be open to the sky. That means you can't build it inside your house. Right? It's supposed to be open to the sky. So if you got an overhanging tree, you got to be careful there's not too much tree branches overhanging your sukkah. And whenever you eat in the sukkah, not only it's a mitzvah to eat in the sukkah. So when we eat in the sukkah, there's an extra bracha, an extra blessing that we say. So for example, we say the kiddush the first night of Sukkot. The opening of the kiddush is similar to the Shabbat kiddush, but it's got Yom Tov reference, holiday references, if not Shabbat references, unless it is Shabbat. You say Mekadesh Yisrael v'hazmanim, Baruch Atah Hashem, Mekadesh Yisrael v'hazmanim. You conclude with praise or blessed or source of blessing, you Lord, who sanctifies Israel in the holidays. The first night, you then say a blessing for performance of the mitzvah of being in the sukkah. Sher kiddushanu mitzvotav v'tzivanu le'shev b'sukkah, who sanctified us by his commandments and commanded us to sit or to live in the sukkah. And in the first night, after you've said that, you then say the Shehechiyanu, which is always said the first night of every holiday. Shehechiyanu v'kimanu v'giyanu l'zman hazeh, thanking God for kept us in life, sustained us, enabled us to reach this happy occasion, this milestone. If everything goes well, and you have your first night in the sukkah, and you say the blessings in the Shehechiyanu that night, the second night of Sukkot, you say Shehechiyanu first and Leishev Basukkah third. Right? If you look in the prayer books where it has the Kiddush for the holiday, you will see it, the directions are that way. Right? And then again, the idea behind it is a festive meal. And just like as I alluded to for Rosh Hashanah, the festive meal can be anything that is festive. There's no written requirement of what it must be. Not really. Although again, you see in some circles, since they believe there's, as the Talmud says, "Ein simcha el b'vasar v'yayin," there's no real joy without meat and wine. They would insist you have to have meat and wine. We have to have wine for kiddush, or at least grape juice, right? But what you eat, what your meal is, whatever that's up to you. All right? You want a nice tuna steak? That's fine too. Okay. If you Sushi? Why not? Okay. So now, so that's and throughout Sukkot, whenever we eat in the sukkah, part of the blessing associated with that, if we say the hamotzi, for example, if it's during the week and you're saying hamotzi, or you're eating something that's not bread, and you say the blessing for what you're eating, you also say leishe basukah, the blessing for dwelling in the sukkah. Okay, so now comes Sukkot morning, and as always, we have the synagogue service. Synagogue service has the openings the same way as we do it on Shabbat. We'll go over that more in detail later. So it's a little bit longer opening. We say extra psalms that are reserved for the holidays and for Sukkot, the holidays and Shabbat. There's a shacharit service. Then, after the shacharit service, there's a special edition of certain psalms that often have the refrain Hallelujah, and that part of the service is called Hallel. Okay. Hallelujah is not an English word. Obviously, hallelujah is just the Hebrew made into English. Right? It's composed of really two parts. Hallelujah is a command, plural command, praise. The Yud Hey on the end, Yah, is a shorthand for the Lord, for Adonai. So hallelujah, if you were translating it in English, is praise the Lord. But you will never see it translated. You always see it transcribed as hallelujah. In Latin, it's alleluia. I don't know why it's alleluia, but it's the Latin. So the full Hallel is recited on the holiday of Sukkot, the first day, and throughout the intermediate days. Now, in most synagogues, what next takes place is Birchat Lulav Esrog, or as they say in Yiddish, benching Esrog, benching Lulav. There are 4 agricultural species that are mentioned in the Torah. They're not necessarily clearly defined as what they are. There's clearly the palm is expressed. Eitz Pri Hadar, the fruit of a goodly tree. Aravot, Hadassim. And the last one is Aravot, which are willow branches. So, and the etrog. What is an etrog? Good question. The etrog is something that if you want to buy it on the day before Sukkot, you may pay several $100s for it. The day after Sukkot is over, you can't give it away. It's a kind of citrus fruit. It looks like a big lemon. It obviously doesn't grow in Canada. It grows in warmer climates. It's available in Israel. You can find it in California, different places, in other moderate climate areas. I will send out some pictures and stuff for you for your enjoyment later on. I should have sent it in advance and I forgot. The etrog is the most important element of the 4 species. Okay? And the reason I say that, well, it's regarded as the most important element. Therefore, it's the most expensive element of the 4. If you go in Israel, usually you buy the 4 elements, the 4 different things in different booths, even maybe. some guy over here is selling etrogim, and guy over here is selling lulavim, and somebody over here might be selling aravot, and somebody might be selling hadassim. Today, usually you go to whatever source you're sourcing it for, and there was a problem getting lulavim into Canada, I understand. It's an agricultural product. They were giving it some problems at the border this year. But anyway, the whole point is you're supposed to have a very nice etrog, very nice lulav, a very nice willow branch, and very nice myrtle branch. The king of the Hebrew, the English doesn't come out as easily. So the quality, how do you determine what's aesthetic about an etrog? Right? How do you decide on that? I don't have an answer to how they came about it, but it should be somewhat narrow. It's supposed to curve in, think of a lemon, you stretch it out a bit, and you have this nice narrowing at the top, okay? And at the end of it, most of them, there's a little thing in Hebrew called a pitum, and the pitum is where the flower originally was, right? You have a flower, the flower gets fertilized, the petals fall off, and that's what's left on the end of it. And you have to have that there. If it breaks off, there's a whole question if the etrog is kosher or not. Okay. So you will see if you haven't gone to a place where they have very, very frum people going to buy a lulav and etrog, you have to go and see it. Sometimes it is an event. You will sometimes see guys coming with a jeweler's class. Because they examine the etrog to make sure there's absolutely no holes in it, no blemishes whatsoever. That it's a nice yellow color, it's got nice bumps on it.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be bumpy, it's not supposed to be smooth. Don't ask me why, but that's the thing, Right? So
Like that, yeah.
that is where the pricing comes in. See, I've ordered my lulav and etrog from a source that I get it every year. How do I know which lulav and etrog, how much I'm paying for the lulav and etrog? By how much I'm paying for the etrog. Everything else comes along with that. Okay? So, 100.
Price for this?
You can get what is considered to be passable for about $60. If you want to get something that's starting to get really good, you're talking about 100 or more. And it's not unusual in some places for people to pay several $100s for an etrog.
And having a nice container.
And you might have a nice container. Well, I see there's a principle in Jewish tradition called hidur mitzvah. Hidur mitzvah means to beautify the mitzvah, make it even nicer. So you can have a standard, what you have to have. For example, you can have a shmata for your talis. As long as it's got 4 corners and covers your back, and you got tzitzit on it, okay, you've met the requirement. But if you want to make it nicer, you have a nicer wool talis. You have a nicer atara, a neck piece on it, right? Similarly, you can have just a standard etrog, and there's nothing wrong with just having that, and especially if you can't afford more than that, that's fine. But if you have the means to get something better, that's nicer. Hidur mitzvah, that's what it's called.
What did my great-grandmother do in Poland? And there was seriously no etrogim around.
Hopefully, there might be one in town.
In a shtibel?
In a shtibel, sometimes they could get one etrog. Sometimes they were able to get an etrog, and they would have to share it. It dries out.
Yeah, like what if you like, yeah.
Big jam.
Like.
Well, it's not, yeah, you have to put a lot of sugar in that jam. We do know, but the question, Harley, your question's not absurd, because yeah, it was difficult. And sometimes they definitely did sometimes use the lulav over the years, even though it got dried out. But the etrog, usually somehow they would get an etrog, or they just didn't have it. Yes,
Is it easy to grow etrogs when you're in the correct climate?
I don't know. I really don't know. It's an unusual fruit.
Only if they're perfect, it's more funny. Otherwise, it's.
Well, again,
Supermarket things.
yeah. But anyway, we read about difficulties that they had in getting all these elements in Eastern Europe, and even parts of Western Europe. By the way, that's one of the reasons there's a whole discussion on sizes of food you have to eat. Right? How much do you have to eat to say hamotzi? How much bread do you have to consume? Or if you want to consume bread, how much do you have to consume before you're required to say the blessing? Or how much matzah you have to eat on Passover? So in Talmudic days even, you didn't have standardized weights and measures. You used natural things. So the size of an olive. You know, different people have different size olives. All right. A size of a barley corn. All right. These were all the traditional measurements. Kazait, the size of an olive. But in Europe, in the 10th century, they didn't know from an olive. They didn't know what an olive looked like. And then also it says about an egg. And so, you know, there's some that are size of eggs. So the Talmud uses both of those measurements. And by the time they get down to the Middle Ages, it gets all fouled up and nobody really knows the relationship between eggs and olives and how big they should be or shouldn't be. So you get all kinds of crazy measurements. So if you take an olive, a standard olive today, most of the traditional authorities say it's too small. What do you mean it's too small? It's the size of an olive. Okay, you have to have the pit in. Okay, so a little bigger with the pit. Just still, but no, that's too small. I don't understand, Rabbi. It says kazayit, like an olive. It says, yeah, but obviously they had bigger olives than we today. They were bigger rather than smaller. Usually it goes the other way around, but that's what you find. So my Seder, I eat a certain amount of matzah while my son and daughter-in-law are still chewing away. I'm ready to finish the meal almost to meet the measurement. Okay. So the etrog has to be nice, at least no big holes in it. It should have the pitum on it. Then the lulav is a palm branch, date palm branch, before it opens up. You look at a palm tree, you've got this frond, right? There's it's sticking out like that. The lulav is what it looks like before the leaves start to spread out. So it should be straight, right? As much as possible. The middle leaf ideally shouldn't be bent or torn. It should be at least, I think it's an I don't remember the measurement that's used, but everybody's bigger than that. Okay. The hadassim, the myrtle, should be a kind of myrtle that the three leaves it comes a series of three leaves, right? You have the stem and then three leaves together, right? They come out of the same spot on the branch. All right, so you have to have the myrtle has to be like that. The aravot, the willows are certain willows. If you come to my house and go to my yard, my son a few years ago was able to get a myrtle to grow, the willow to grow that he had from that Sukkot. We planted it, so now every year we have a willow tree that we go get from our willows. Okay, so it is doable. He's never been able to get the myrtle to grow. Those dry out very quickly, especially the willows. And so people, once you use it, you wrap it in wet cloths, or you put it in water, all kinds of ways to try to preserve it. Okay, so now we've got the four elements. What do we do with them? We're supposed to put them together. All right. The three myrtle the two aravot, aravot, the hadassim and the aravot, the lulav, and the etrog. You're supposed to bring them together and wave them. And what we do is, the standard procedure is, you pick up the etrog, but you make sure it's upside down. Right? The stem side, where it attaches to the branch, is on top right now. Okay, that's considered upside down because the etrog grows on top. It doesn't hang down. Don't ask me how. And it also stays on for many years. It doesn't necessarily, it's not each year's new crop. Okay. So you have it with the stem on the top. You say the blessing. We just say lulav, we don't say baminim. You turn it up, and then you're going to wave it 3 times east, facing the ark. If you see me doing the synagogue, some people doing their sukkah at home before they come. And so there's 3 times east, 3 times south, 3 times west, 3 times north, 3 times up, and 3 times down. Okay. Very clearly, this is a ritual that is associated with the agricultural, the world around. If you think about it, when you wave them and it shakes a little bit, it can also have the sound of rain hitting leaves. And in Israel, Sukkot is the end of the dry season, just before the rainy season. So I think that's part of it. Part of it is asking God's blessings on all the 4 corners of the earth and above and below. And symbolized by using this arba, meaning these 4 agricultural elements. Midrashically, midrash means the way, in this case, it means homiletical, a nice explanation, not necessarily literal explanation of the arba meaning, is it represent 4 kinds of Jews. Or people in general. Some have no mitzvot with them at all. There's nothing to them. That's the willow. There's nothing to, willow's got nothing. It's orange, nothing. The myrtle at least has some seeds. It has a fragrance, excuse me. The myrtle has a fragrance, an aroma. The lulav produces fruit. And the etrog is fruit. So they're Jew, all right, and filled with seeds. So there are those Jews who don't do anything in terms of mitzvot. There are some who do some. There's some who do more, and then those who do them all, as it were. It's not exactly the way, but that's the way I'm using the midrash. Others suggest it talks about 4 parts of our body. The willow looks like our lips. The etrog's supposed to be our heart. The lulav is our spine, and hadassim are our eyes, I think, as you said. But and then these are all midrashic treatments of it, and there are other versions of that as well. So before the Hallel service, or before we even go to shul at home, we bench, as they say in Yiddish, bench lulav and etrog. We say, take the lulav and etrog and wave it around. By the way, if you have little problems with this, I understand. My father, blessed memory, did not like Sukkot. He was really bothered by the lulav and etrog business. He thought it was very, it's kind of superstition, magical kind of thing. So of course, my father died during the middle of Sukkot. Yeah, so we observe Sukkot, and we always have his yortzeit in the middle of Sukkot. All right, but I'm not good for stories here. When my father had an accident, just before Sukkot, he has an accident. He's in the hospital. My 2 brothers and I come, and we stay in the hospital for Sukkot because it's not near where they live. And we have our lulav and etrog, and in the morning we take our lulav and etrog, and we pray, and we got our talesim over our heads, and we're praying with these lulav and etrog, and there's a some poor gentleman who happens to be an African American who had been sleeping in the same waiting room where we were, spending the night to be near my father. And he wakes up and he sees these three guys in hoods, in white hoods, waving things around. What did he get out of there so fast? I felt so bad for him. I felt so bad for him. He didn't know what hit him. Poor guy.
The clan is in Ontario.
What?
The clan is here.
Well, this is not Ontario. This is in Jacksonville, Florida. It makes it even worse because they really, the only race riots in Jacksonville were whites beating on blacks. The only race riots ever in Jacksonville was whites doing the rioting. So our African-American neighbors, I grew up in that era. I remember the white only and black, colored only water fountains and bathrooms and all that stuff. It was a terrible thing that you wouldn't want to see. Okay, so anyway, so getting back to earth here. So during the Hallel service, at certain parts of the service, we also wave the lulav and etrog. And part of the Hallel service has the phrases Hoshiana, save us. Ana Hashem Hoshiana. Please, the Lord, save us. Now, as a sidebar, in the New Testament, when Jesus comes to Jerusalem and the crowds greet him, they greet him with lulavs, palm branches, and they say, Hoshana. Right? Palm Sunday. That's Palm Sunday. But, and this is not my problem, that's the problem for the Christian world. Palm Sunday is Easter, not Sukkot. Time to tell the rabbi's going on too long. All right.
30 minutes remaining.
Yeah, no, I got 4 hours yet. But anyway, so it's a question in my mind, what happened? And that's, again, for other minds to try and understand how and why that's the language in the New Testament. It just doesn't make sense when you look at the historical reality, but I don't know. Okay. Okay, so then what we also have on Sukkot, we have the Torah reading. There's a special Torah reading each day of Sukkot. There's the Musaf is the Yom Tov Musaf. The Musaf for every Yom Tov, Passover, Sukkot, Shavuot, is essentially the same with just different mentions of the holiday and the particular sacrifices that were offered on that particular holiday. Otherwise, the basic text is the same. Now, what is a special aspect of Sukkot is after the Musaf, those who have lulav and etrog, we have a passage where we recite the Hoshanas, as they're called, and we circle the synagogue with the traditionally with the ark, not the ark, the reader's table in the middle, and you march around, and there's several passages that are recited dealing with the time of year it is, each day of the holiday. There's a different one that is recited. Okay? And those are the Hoshanot. We don't do it on Shabbat, and we don't bring the lulav and etrog to the synagogue on Shabbat. Okay? Just like we don't blow the shofar because the rabbis were worried about people carrying the shofar in the public domain if Rosh Hashanah fell on Shabbat. Similarly, we don't bring the lulav and etrog to the synagogue because they were worried that people might carry it in the public thoroughfare, which we have to talk about more when we come to the laws of Shabbat. Okay. So, but instead of marching around the synagogue, we recite a special Hoshanot, the ark is opened, but we don't march around. Otherwise, on the regular days, the first day of the holiday and the rest of the days of that week, we take the Torah out from the ark. It's by the reader's platform, and the people, and we circle once around. Okay? And so we do that each day of Sukkot. The last day of Sukkot is called Hoshana Rabbah. It's called Hoshana Rabbah because we say the Hoshana 7 times. We march around the synagogue 7 times. And there are other prayers that are added into that. In some synagogues omit parts of whatever they are, depending on the synagogue. And that's part of the reason why the calendar is adjusted to make sure that Hoshana Rabbah will not fall on Shabbat. The principle is Lo Adu Rosh. Rosh Hashanah will never fall on Sunday morning, Saturday night, Sunday morning, or Wednesday night, Thursday morning, Wednesday night, not Wednesday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday, Lo Adu Rosh, and on Friday. Okay, that's to make sure that Yom Kippur doesn't fall on a Friday or a Sunday, and that Hoshana Rabbah doesn't fall on Shabbat. If you don't remember that, don't worry about it. I'm not going to ask you on a test for it, I promise. Okay? Then I sneak it in and cheat on you. No, I wouldn't do that. I would never do that. Well, today the calendar is structured so it cannot happen. Yes, it may have indeed happened thousands of years ago, but since the standardization of the calendar came about, it can't happen. Okay. So every day of Sukkot, we have the lulav and etrog in the morning. You can actually do it all day long if you don't do it first thing in the morning until sunset. We light candles the first night. The second night, though, is a little bit different. Why is the second night different? We go back again to our calendar problem. And this you do need to understand, to remember. All of this is a question. The second day of the holiday, or the first day of the holiday, which day really is the first day of the holiday? What? It would make sense, yeah, maybe, but then we say, but we also do the first day.
Yeah, but the first day is going Erev.
Well, no, all right, Friday, Sunday night, Monday morning, that's the first day.
Yeah, oh, okay.
Monday night, Tuesday morning is the second day. Okay. Which one of those is theoretically the real first day of Sukkot? We don't know. I mean, we literally know, we have the calendar now. Going back to the idea of the built-in doubt that was part of the creation of the calendar as we have it. So we don't want to start the second night of Sukkot when it is still the first day of Sukkot. So we wait until the stars come out at night before we light the candles, before we say the Kiddush, before we do all of these observances. So every one of the second days of holidays will always, the second day, the candle lighting time will always be approximately 42 minutes after sunset, or an hour later than when you lit candles the night before. 42. If you have 18 minutes before normally, 42 minutes after sunset is when the stars come out approximately. It gives you an hour difference. Okay, so unless the second night is Shabbat, in which case we have to light them at the normal time. All right, everybody with me? But the Kiddush will be the same Kiddush. The language of the Kiddush will be the same. Yom Chag HaSukkot is Zman Cherutenu, this holiday of Sukkot, the time of our rejoicing. For the rabbis, Sukkot was the holiday par excellence, the real holiday. There's no other holiday like Sukkot. So in the Talmud, they refer to Chag. When they say Chag, which simply means holiday, they're always talking about Chag HaSukkot, the holiday of Sukkot. they don't refer Chag yeah, there might be someplace Chag HaPesach. If you said Chag, you'll be talking about Sukkot. You won't be talking about other Chagim normally. And that's the language. Zman Simchatenu. For Pesach, we say Zman Cherutenu, the time of our freedom. And for Shavuot, we say Zman Matan Toratenu, the time of giving the Torah. So Sukkot, v'samachta b'chagecha v'ayita chag sameach, we should rejoice on the holiday and have a festive time. Ach sameach, I said chag sameach, ach sameach. Okay. So it's considered to be a very joyous time. Not in the Bible, but in standard rabbinic practice, as part of the Sukkot celebration was a drawing of water. There was a special ceremony in which water was brought from the Siloam spring. There's a whole list of how it had to be done, so we won't go into it. And then the Kohen, the high priest, was supposed to pour water on the altar. Again, it's probably an allusion to the coming of the rainy season, of the coming of rain. And we know that the Pharisees emphasized this holiday. The Pharisees were one group of Jews at that time, and then there were the Sadducees, who opposed the rabbinic interpretations. Yeah? And so we have recorded both in the Talmud and in Josephus. This is in the case where we have an external evidence for something found in rabbinic tradition, that one of the high priests, instead of pouring the water on the altar, poured it at his feet. And the people who were assembled there threw their etzrogim at him for having done that. Simchat Beit HaShoeva is what it's called. In many synagogues, more traditional synagogues, will have festivities, and they call it Simchat Beit HaShoeva during the Sukkot period of time. Okay. All right, so now we finished with Sukkot. We're coming to Shemini Atzeret, the 8th day of assembly. There's a big difference of opinion. Do you eat in the sukkah or not eat in the sukkah? We're going to skip over that, talk to your rabbi, what your rabbi suggests you do or not do. It is a distinct, separate holiday, although nobody thinks of it that way. And their thing is Sukkot, 8 days of Sukkot. Okay. But it's identified as Yom Shemini Atzeret or Yom Shemini Chag Atzeret Hazeh. Still Simchatenu, but it's got its own name. And one of the things that's associated with it is that on Shemini Atzeret, we change a little bit of the daily liturgy and add a phrase in the Amidah, the standing prayer, the silent prayer, Mashiv Haruach Umorid Hageshem. He who causes the winds to blow and the rains to fall. You will see in Sidurim, in prayer books, it says from Shemini Atzeret, Musaf Shemini Atzeret on, we add this line. When it's not up until then, the standard custom outside of the land of Israel is to not say anything at that point. In Israel, they say Morid Hatal, causes the dew to fall. So the Musaf service, at the repetition of the Musaf on Shemini Atzeret, we treat it almost like it's Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. The Chazan wears a white kittel, and the ark is open, and a special piyut is recited in which we request rain. And at the end of that piyut is the refrain, Mashiv HaRuach Morida Geshem. causes the winds to blow, the rains to fall. And presumably that is the beginning of the rainy season in Israel. Strangely enough, because the Jews who lived in Babylonia, as it's called, in modern day Iraq, Mesopotamia, had to get home after Sukkot, in the daily prayers, they did not add the prayer for rain until a little bit later. Shabbat, this Mashiv Aruach, they did say, but in the prayer which asks God's blessings for the earth, Berech Aleinu Shana Zot, God should bless this year, you don't say the prayer for rain. You just say Tein Baracha. And then a few weeks later, when they would be home, they start making that change. But as time has gone on, because of issues with the calendar, that's why we don't say it now until December the 4th or 5th. All right? So why do we say it here? We say it because the seasons and the prayers refer to Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel. Even though we live outside of Israel, even though the farmers here have different seasonal requirements, our ideal is to look to the land of Israel and we figure out that God, he knows if you're in Canada and you need rain at different times of the year, he'll do it. But if there were a dry spell here, maybe we might say special prayers for rain, just like we would do in Israel when the rains don't come. But we have a very different agricultural phenomenon here. We can have rain and snow, or one of the two all year long, all year round. In Israel, there's very clearly a rainy season and very clearly a dry season. It almost never rains in the dry season. You may get a drop or two once in a while. In the rainy season, if you're going to have rain, that's when you're going to get it. Or snow is when you're going to get it. You better get it because the crops are dependent upon that rainfall. Right? So that becomes part of Shemini Atzeret. Now, what happens is the second day is called Simchat Torah, the rejoicing of the Torah. The tradition very early on was to read from the Torah every Shabbat. How much was read is not at all clear. We don't know. We do know that two different customs developed. One custom, which became the dominant custom outside the land of Israel and eventually became the custom universally, is that the Shabbat after Shemini Atzeret, Simchat Torah, we start the cycle with reading the beginning of Bereshit, the beginning of Genesis. Each Shabbat, we read several chapters, and they vary. Where we end on one Shabbat, we begin the next Shabbat. And in the course of the year, we will read through the entire 5 books of Moses, the Torah, and till the Shabbat preceding Sukkot, in which we read the next to last section. And on Shemini Atzeret, second day, Simchat Torah, we read the ending chapters of the book of Deuteronomy, Sefer Devarim, and we begin immediately reading Sefer Bereshit, Genesis. So what happens is at the night of Simchat Torah, at night after Shemini Atzeret, we dance around with the Torahs. We go through. We have circling of the synagogue with the Torah scrolls and dancing and singing. Normally you then take one of the Torah scrolls that are rolled to the end of Deuteronomy. Unusual, we don't normally do this at night, but most synagogues will read 3 or 5 aliyot that night. In the morning, we repeat it, the same thing, marching around, but this time we take 3 Sifrei Torah, if we have 3 Torot. If you only have one, you have only one, whatever you can do. So we after we do all the singing and dancing and roaming around the synagogue, and a lot of people have a tradition of having a l'chaim after they walk around, and hopefully they can still walk around after they've had a few l'chaims that sometimes do overdo it at the synagogue. But then, yeah, whiskey. Preferably good bourbon, but some people drink scotch. I can't understand that at all. But anyway, scotch drinkers, bleh. Scotch drinkers, bourbon. Give me a good bourbon.
Single malt.
Give me a single barrel bourbon any day.
Oh, yeah, I'm with you.
Okay.
Scotch drinker.
Okay, well, I'll forgive you. All right.
Happy Van Winkle.
Yeah,
You know what it is.
yeah. Maker's Mark.
That's good.
That's good. There's some Blanton. All right, anyway. So after we march around, we're going to read from the Torah. But there arose a tradition that again, it depends on the synagogue. If it's a more traditional synagogue, since only men have aliyot, only men get aliyot. If it's a synagogue where men and women both get aliyot, then the women also share in aliyot. Now, it depends upon the synagogue how they do their thing. Everyone is supposed to get an aliyah to the Torah. Some synagogues will have several Torah readings going on in different parts of the synagogue, in the building. Some will just have one, and they will call people up in big groups. The various ways it's done in different synagogues. You'll see what it's like in the synagogue you go to for Simchat Torah. Till we finish, and so we read the same chapter over and over again, the same five aliyot over and over again, until everybody's had their aliyah. Then there is one individual tradition, just goes the male format, because that was the way the tradition was originally set up. One individual is given the honor to be called Chatan Torah, literally the bridegroom of the Torah. And that person has the honor of saying the blessings for the concluding passages from Deuteronomy, the death of Moses. Okay? And there's a special way they're called up, and sometimes there's a whole whoop-de-doo, and sometimes they're escorted to the Torah scroll under a chuppah, all right, and singing what have you. All right, so now to make life easier, hopefully you've got 3 Torah scrolls that are all kosher. So the second Torah scroll is then opened to Genesis, the opening lines of Genesis. And a second individual is honored with being called Chatan Bereshit, the bridegroom of Genesis, because the 7 days of creation are read for that aliyah. So as soon as we finish Sefer Devarim, the book of Deuteronomy, immediately we turn to Genesis, Bereshit. So there's no lack of time, no pause between them, as it were. As soon as we finish reading the Torah, we start it all over again, without fail. Now, on every holiday, there's an extra Torah that's taken out for the Musaf Aliyah, the additional reading that refers to the holiday itself. So too on Simchat Torah and Shemini Atzeret, that same reading. And a person who is going to chant the prophetic reading, the Haftarah, gets that Aliyah. And so for Simchat Torah, the passage that was chosen to be read is the passage that is the opening of the book of Joshua, Sefer Yehoshua. Why? What is the first book of the Bible after the 5 books of Moses? Any guess? Joshua. Okay. So we're saying, even though the rest of the Bible, the Tanakh, doesn't have the same sanctity that the Torah has, it is part of that tradition. And so we want to connect it to rejoicing of Simchat Torah. Gesundheit. Briut. Now, one thing that I omitted, didn't mention for Shemini Atzeret, just like on Yom Kippur, we recite Yizkor prayers on Shemini Atzeret. But since this last day of the holiday season is Simchat Torah and our rejoicing, we don't mix the two of them together. And so that's why we don't do it on the last day of the holiday season. For Pesach and Shavuot, it's always on the last day. However, in Israel, since they only have one day, they do both together. I don't really understand how that works too well, right? But they have Simchat Torah and Yizkor together. But they do Yizkor earlier, if I recall correctly. And the Yizkor prayers are prayers for our beloved that are deceased. Traditionally, when you have on Yizkor, the night before that day, so the night leading into Shemini Atzeret, we light what is called a Yortzeit candle or memorial candle, Hazkara, a memorial for the deceased, as well as when we commemorate the day of their death. Okay. There's a tradition to light a candle that burns for at least 24 hours. In Yiddish, it's called a Yartzeit light. The day of their death is called in Yiddish Yartzeit, the day that we commemorate their death. So finally, when we say Havdalah over the wine at the end of Simchat Torah, most wives take a deep breath and say, finally, I'll have to worry about a Shabbos from now on for a while. Okay, because my wife, bless her, she's been cooking for Yantiv, Rosh Hashanah, and she's got to cook for Sukkot. Okay, and that is the end of the major holiday season. The next month in the Jewish calendar is actually called Mar Cheshvan. Mar Cheshvan comes from the Babylonian name, and Mar Cheshvan really means the 8th month. Okay, but in Hebrew, Mar can mean Mr. It can also mean in Aramaic. It can also mean bitter. So Mar Cheshvan is the bitter Cheshvan because there are no holidays. But that the original name really is Mar Cheshvan from the Babylonian name for the holiday, for this, for the month. And so the next thing we really have on the calendar will be Hanukkah, which is really a minor holiday as it goes. Okay, I think I covered all of the holiday. Okay, any questions? Anybody? All right, so I hope you'll have the opportunity, especially to go for Simchat Torah. It is very unusual because it's the time when the synagogue is really a happy place, singing and dancing, hopefully. Although you can go to some synagogues where it's we got to march around. We have to sing. So let's do a perfunctory marching around and singing. And others go absolutely crazy. Okay, so everything in between. All right. I kept you a little later last week. This week I'll let you go home a little bit earlier. All righty. I forgot to record last week's session. But if you want, you can find not last but the year before for 2021 for Yom Kippur session. You'll see it's on there. Okay. This one I did record tonight. All right. Shana Tova Metuka. Tichatemu v'tichatemu. May you all be inscribed and sealed for a good and happy life.
Thank you. Shana Tova.
Shana Tova.
Thank you.
And an easy fast. Well, we'll be here next week. Is it next week? Yeah, before Yom Kippur.
Thank you, Rabbi. Goodbye.
Thank you.